For 6 consecutive years, Ferrari owned Le Mans. No manufacturer could touch Enzo Ferrari's dominance. Then Henry Ford II took a failed buyout as a personal humiliation and poured millions into turning a 24-hour race into a vendetta. By June 1966, his GT40 crossed the finish line first, second, and third. But recently discovered footage reveals what that victory actually cost and who paid the price. In May 1963, Henry Ford II sent negotiator Don Frey to Maranello with an $18 million buyout offer. The goal was to acquire Ferrari, absorb its racing pedigree, and secure instant dominance in Europe. For weeks, negotiations progressed smoothly, until Enzo Ferrari reached a contract clause regarding control over his racing division. Realizing he would lose absolute authority over the Scuderia, Enzo refused to sign. He walked out of the boardroom, leaving the Ford team stunned. The collapse of the deal was a public, bitter personal insult to Henry Ford II. Enzo had rejected a buyout and dismissed Detroit's capability. At the time, Ferrari held absolute control over endurance racing, capturing 6 consecutive Le Mans victories from 1960 through 1965. Henry Ford II resolved that if he could not buy Ferrari, he would crush them on the track. He bypassed normal corporate channels, directing Ford's massive resources toward one specific target, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. This was no longer about selling cars, it was a personal vendetta. Ford authorized an initial budget of $1.8 million, partnering with Lola Cars to build a mid-engine Challenger. But money could not buy immediate engineering solutions. The early Mark I prototypes, powered by a 4.7-liter V8, arrived at Le Mans in 1964 as unstable, unproven machines. At speeds over 200 miles per hour, the sleek noses trapped air, causing terrifying tail lift that made the cars nearly airborne. Under the hood, the cooling vents choked off airflow, causing engines to overheat. Worse, the high torque of the American V8 cracked the magnesium gearbox housings. All 3 entries retired. The 1965 campaign brought more of the same: blown clutches, broken differentials, and a complete sweep of mechanical retirements. After 2 years of intensive spending, Ford's multi-million-dollar program had produced nothing but high-profile wrecks and consecutive DNFs. The Detroit giant was failing publicly, exposed by basic mechanical limits. In late 1965, Henry Ford II handed control of the program to Carroll Shelby. Shelby brought immediate discipline to a project that had squandered millions. Under his direction, the GT40 underwent a complete mechanical overhaul, emerging as the Mark II. He discarded the fragile chassis setups of the past, opting for heavy steel reinforcements, adjustable Coney shocks, and thick ventilated disc brakes. The centerpiece of this redesign was a massive 7-liter V8 adapted from Ford's NASCAR division. This heavy engine was built to endure, running at lower, safer revolutions per minute while still producing over 400 horsepower. Shelby's development team focused entirely on durability, knowing a car had to survive 24 hours of punishment before it could ever win. Backed by a strong Carcraft transmission, Ford finally possessed a machine built to outlast the competition. Ken Miles understood the machine better than any engineer in Dearborn. Throughout 1965, the British-born driver pushed the prototypes to their limits during exhausting development runs at Riverside and Willow Springs. Miles's detailed test logs analyzed suspension deflection, brake temperatures, and fuel pump fluctuations, translating raw power into drivable reliability. Ford avoided risking its corporate pride on a single heroic entry. Carroll Shelby built a multi-car juggernaut designed to overwhelm Ferrari through sheer depth. Alongside Miles, Shelby recruited the formidable New Zealand pairing of Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon to anchor the squad. In total, Ford distributed 8 factory-backed Mark II entries across 3 elite teams: Shelby American, Holman and Moody, and Allen Mann Racing. This calculated brute force strategy combined American big block muscle with international road racing intellect. By dispersing the competitive pressure across multiple world-class crews, Ford ensured that even if individual cars broke under the immense strain, the collective assault on Maranello would remain unyielding. On June 18, 1966, the green flag dropped at the Circuit de la Sarthe, sending a fleet of 8 factory-backed Ford GT40 Mark IIs across the track, split between Shelby American, Holman and Moody, and Allen Mann Racing. This massive deployment was designed for calculated endurance rather than a reckless, all-out sprint. Ford's victory plan relied on a systematic approach where drivers received strict orders to run disciplined, steady lap times. They kept engine revolutions well below the red line, preserving the massive 7-liter V8 engines and managing the intense heat building up in the ventilated disc brakes. It was a war of mechanical preservation, structured to bait Ferrari into pushing past its limits. The relentless tempo set by the American entries began to exploit the vulnerabilities of the Italian team. To match the depth of the Ford assault, Enzo Ferrari's sophisticated but underdeveloped 330 P3 and 365 P2 prototypes had to run flat out through the corners and down the Mulsanne straight. Under this continuous pressure, the red cars began to fracture. 9 hours into the event, Ferrari number 50 suffered a catastrophic gearbox failure. By midnight, a blocked radiator choked off the airflow to number 51, forcing it to overheat and retire. Just after 3 o'clock in the morning, the final factory Ferrari, car number 52, ground to a halt with a shattered transmission oil pump. The Italian defense had completely evaporated. With Maranello's challengers out of the running, the race transformed into a display of absolute corporate dominance. Ford's multi-car strategy had ground the opposition down, leaving the top of the leaderboard entirely clear. As Sunday morning arrived, the surviving Mark IIs held a lockdown grip on the front of the field. Ken Miles and Denny Hume controlled the pace in their white-striped entry, leading the sister car of Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon, while Ronnie Bucknam and Dick Hutcherson maintained third. The order looked entirely settled, with the multi-million-dollar program on the cusp of delivering Henry Ford the definitive sweep he had demanded. With a sweep secured, Ford racing director Leo Beebe made a fateful corporate decision. He ordered Ken Miles, who held a commanding lead, to slow down and allow Bruce McLaren's sister car to pull alongside him. The goal was a staged, side-by-side photo finish for global publicity. Miles complied, backing off his pace to let McLaren close the gap, and the two GT40s crossed the finish line together. But the promotional stunt triggered an immediate, devastating ruling from the officials. Under Le Mans regulations, victory is determined by the absolute distance covered over 24 hours, measured from each car's starting grid position. Because McLaren's car started 20 yards further back on the grid, it had traveled a slightly greater distance. Officials declared McLaren the victor. Ken Miles, who had carried the program on his back, was stripped of the win on a technicality. Newly recovered 16mm footage, authenticated through date markers, camera positions, and pitboard comparisons, captures the raw tension of mechanics and the violent speed of the GT40s on the Mulsanne straight, but the triumph was immediately shadowed by tragedy. On August 17, 1966, Ken Miles was killed at Riverside during a test run of the experimental GT40 J car. Though Ford secured subsequent Le Mans victories from 1967 through 1969, the program had lost its driver-engineer. Today, these original historic machines command over $12 million, standing as permanent monuments to a brutal, fleeting era of corporate vengeance. Today, the GT40 stands as a monument to corporate power, but its true legacy is written in sacrifice. Behind the marketing triumph lies the unresolved tragedy of Ken Miles, a reminder that in the pursuit of corporate glory, the human soul is often the first casualty. Share your thoughts below.